Zoom town hall. I've done a lot of Zoom meetings lately, as most of you have, but this is my first town hall. I'm Keith Baker. I'm currently serving as Chaffee County Commissioner from District 1. And I didn't say representing District 1 because even though I live in District 1, as I have explained on one of my earlier videos, which is on my YouTube channel, I represent all of Chaffee County. I represent every Chaffee County resident. And the reason that we have districts is for geographic dispersal, or to make sure that the commissioners are spread around the county. Because it's conceivable, if you didn't have those provisions, that all three commissioners could live on the same block in Salida or Buena Vista or somewhere else, and we don't want that. So that's why we have the three districts, and they're apportioned basically by population. And District 1 is up here on the north end, the northern tier, as I call it, and then District 2 is generally the central part of the county and ducks down on the southern side of Salida, and then District 3 is primarily Salida proper. And it has, because Salida has so much more population, that's why geographically District 3 is small. But I digress. So let me give you a bit of a roadmap of what we're going to do tonight. I'll talk a little bit, a few minutes about some things about my philosophy and vision, what some people call priorities. And I try to steer away from the term priorities when it comes to commissioner business, and I'll explain why. And talk a little bit about some accomplishments that our team has made during this term, and then kind of forecast what I'm looking after or looking out to in a second term. And then we'll get to some of your questions, and those you can submit via the chat function. If you don't know how to use Zoom chat, I can explain it briefly depending on what kind of machine you're on. If you're on a workstation or a laptop, you can probably scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom view and you'll see where it says chat. Select on that, it'll open a window up, and then you can just kind of follow your nose from that. If you're on an iPad or another tablet, your presentation, you may have to go up to the upper right hand corner and select three dots there, and then it will probably give you a menu, which chat will be one of those. And so that's the way I'll be happy to take your questions. The only questions that are off limits, because there are some, I will not comment or give you my opinion or tell you how I am going to vote on anything that's going to be on the ballot in November. And that includes state propositions, amendments, and so forth. Those are things that are not going to come before the county commissioners, or if they do, if someone does bring them to the county commissioners asking us to endorse them or to pass a resolution opposing them, then that's a corporate decision that we will all make together, and I don't want to color that in any way at this point. Otherwise, those are private decisions for me as a voter, and I will make them over at that kitchen table right over there, just the same as you will in the privacy of your own home. Second thing, I can't discuss any pending applications before the Board of Commissioners or that might come before the Board of Commissioners. And I think we all know what some of those might be. Primarily land use decisions and things of that nature. Those are quasi-judicial processes, and I can't, because of due process considerations and ex parte communications considerations, I can't comment on those. Otherwise, I'm fair game. I'm all yours till 8 o'clock. If we get finished before 8, we'll finish up, but we won't go past 8 because I know we're all busy. So I think that is just about all my preambular comments before my other comments, so I will get on into those. And if you do have any questions or anything, please don't hesitate to ask via chat about procedural questions. One thing that people have been mentioning to me recently about why they are supporting me or why they're going to vote for me is because they like the composition of the current Board of Commissioners and how we work together, and that they think there is a good balance of viewpoints, a good balance of party representation amongst the commissioners, and they value that and they want to keep that. and I can certainly understand why. Now, I will say that personally, I really wish that at the commissioner level, elections weren't partisan. I've lived in states, one of the benefits of a Navy career is you live lots of places. I've lived in states where up until you got to the state legislature level, all races were nonpartisan. Now you had an idea, and people do belong to parties, but it didn't get into this party versus party angst sort of situations that we see sometimes. And so consequently, I really don't think, and you've seen some letters to the editor that your fellow citizens and residents feel the same way. They really don't think that party matters that much in local elections. And I feel the same way. So we've got a good team, and we're working well together, so why unbalance that? Now, people ask me, well, what are your priorities sometimes? Well, I don't like to use priorities as a term for this because commissioners balance so many different issues, and we have to look at so many different points of view, back to my point about representing everyone who lives in the county, that saying you have this or that priority can be misleading. People will misinterpret that, well, if this came before the commissioners and you voted this way, then that runs counter to what you said your priorities were. What I go by, what my North Stars are visions, and they're really not my visions, they're visions that citizens tell me they have. They're visions that have been consistent now for several years in various processes that I've been through, going back to the Land Use Roundtable, going back to several other processes, going back to the town of Buena Vista, working on our strategic planning documents and updating our comprehensive plan, and the Envision process that we went through a couple of years ago, and now our own comprehensive plan process. And they boil down to three real guide stones for me, or three real North Stars. People tell me they want to live in a community that is a safe place for all to live, work, and play. A place where they feel that they're going to be respected, where there's a free flow of communication, and people are working together to make the community a better place. That's number one, and that's my number one vision. The second is they want to live in a place that has clean air, good land, clean water, and our wildlife is protected. That's why people move to Chaffee County. That's one of the things that they value, is our agricultural lands.
Oh, okay.
And our production agricultural lands, our wildlife habitat, our aquifer recharge. So that's the second component of my vision, or our vision, that people tell me they have. And then the third is a diverse and sustainable economy where people can afford to live, can afford a decent place to live, can afford a decent roof over their head, safe, secure, adequate housing, and they have a good chance of raising their children and raising their family to achieve the American dream. So they can go on to a good education at a state school, community college, vocational education, whatever their choice is. But those three things, a safe place to live, generally speaking safe in the broader sense, clean air, clean land, clean water, protected wildlife, and a diverse and sustainable economy where people can prosper. But you can't do visions. So what do I see as things that I can do, or strategic level objectives that I can do to help achieve those visions? And these are all touchstones that come from my 2016 campaign and have carried through my 3.5 years now, almost 4 years as a county commissioner, and what I see even still going forward. First is building community in the broadest sense. What can I do to foster building community where people communicate together well, and where they have mutual respect, they truly listen to each other, they respect and understand the needs of other people, not just their own, and what can they do to help foster that? And that requires involving people at many different levels, people from all sorts of points of view and all sorts of perspectives. Again, representing everyone in the county, not just the people from your district, your neighborhood, your party, or your particular point of view. You have to represent everyone and understand everyone. So the second part of what I can do is preserve heritage, preserving heritage. And this again is a broad area. It isn't just historical buildings. It isn't just the Chaffee County Heritage Area Advisory Board. Those are all key elements. Preserving our historic schools like Maxwell Park School, Gas Creek School, some of the others, our other historical buildings, but it also means preserving and protecting our production. So that's the second time that's happened to me in what, 6 months now, so not too bad. Pretty decent batting average. So back to where I was, it's preserving our production ag lands and keeping our ranch lands in ranching and giving our ranchers options other than just selling off the land and subdividing it because they say they want to stay in production ag, and I certainly want them to. That's part of the reason that I like to live in Chaffee County, is because we do have viable ranch lands still. Some places, they're all gone. And people tell you one of the things they like about living in Chaffee County is it still does have that rural character. And I grew up in the country, grew up in the sticks, as they told me, and I still like the rural nature of Chaffee County and where we live. So our ag lands and open space, those are important parts of our heritage. As I heard one fellow say one time, we have 3 legs of our heritage stool here in Chaffee County. We have mining, we have railroading, and we have ranching. And we need to preserve and honor those 3 elements. And so the third leg of my stool about what we can do, what I can do, what are my guiding lights to help us achieve our vision, is preparing for the future. If you don't anticipate events, if you don't prepare for the future, then things happen so fast that you're not able to deal with them. And we saw that to a certain extent with COVID-19 here in the county. But on the other hand, we also know that we have infrastructure requirements. We need to make repairs. We need to be proactive. We need to do planned maintenance on our roads, on our bridges, on other things that the county maintains, on our buildings. We need to increase our broadband throughput, our bandwidth, and where broadband reaches out to. We need to have more robust job training programs, vocational technical programs, and capitalize on the opportunity that Colorado Mountain College's presence, more robust presence here in the county, gives us. And we also, as a county organization, as the government of the county, need to have policies and procedures and plans in place that help us deal with things 5 to 10 years down the road. Now, we don't want to spend a lot of time and effort planning and devoting resources to things 50 years downstream, but it doesn't hurt to be thinking about 50 years downstream and what the county is going to look like, and have a very thin file of what we think will need to be in place 50 years downstream. So the most important thing confronting us right now is recovery from our current situation, recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe, and many others believe, that we're poised for a good, robust recovery. And the reason we are is because Chaffee Countyans have done a good job following the 5 rules of preventing COVID spread. Generally speaking, people have voluntarily masked quite well when I walk over to the post office or go out to do some shopping, get gas or whatever. Most people I see are wearing a mask. Now, occasionally you see somebody who isn't, but then when you notice the reason they aren't, and the reason I'm not now, and the reason I'm not when I'm walking to the post office or somewhere, is because I have that social distancing. So in addition to masking, there's that 6 feet of separation. Most people are following that. And when they get within that 6-foot bubble, that's when they don their mask or put their buff up or what have you. Third element, frequent hand washing, use of hand sanitizer, wearing gloves if you're going to be touching surfaces quite often. And then the final two, and these are the two that people sometimes forget, is if you have symptoms, stay home, and if you do have symptoms, you need to get tested and get checked out. So when you leave home, go straight to get tested and then come straight home, and don't mix and blend with people. And that's what's kept our community spread quite low, and the outbreaks that we have had, tragic as it was at Columbine Manor, and the one at the correctional facility. That's where the bulk of our cases have been, at Columbine, at the correctional facility, and our public health professionals, our DOC professionals, the staff at Columbine, and at Heart of the Rockies Regional Medical Center, and all of our public health providers did a great job at trying to manage those things. And if we can just continue with those good behaviors until a vaccine comes, and then until we get enough people adequately vaccinated, then I think Chaffee County is going to do quite well. But here's the second part of that problem. If we deal with the health issues and we do get a vaccine, and we do get adequate numbers of people vaccinated, and we do have adequate community resistance to the virus, this job market and this economy are different than anything any of us have ever seen. We need jobs, and we need to work back into that resilient and sustainable economy that I talked about before. The problem with this recession, and let's hope it stays a recession and doesn't get any worse, is that most recessions are a liquidity problem. There's a problem of cash flow, there's a problem of financing, there's a problem of getting business loans. This economic problem could turn into an insolvency problem, which means that businesses are completely out of business. Businesses don't just have a problem moving capital around, they are slap out of capital. Slap out is a southern term that you may have heard before. That means you are completely bereft of a resource or completely bereft of something that you need. And so if we completely run out of capital and businesses are going completely out of business, that's a different problem than having an economic downturn. So that's something that we do have to work on preparing for in the recovery. And then the third thing is long-term challenges, and this kind of relates back to preparing for the future with job creation, job skills training, vocational technical training, perhaps repurposing a lot of buildings. If some businesses do go out of business, what can be done with those businesses that they vacate? Can we divide that up into affordable housing? Can they become a homeless facility? Similar to the bridge down in Alamosa, which is something that our homeless coalition would like to see. And I think those of us in county government would like to see at some time, and most community leaders would like to see, is a transitional homeless facility where people can live while they're getting job skills and getting another job. So back to the preparing for the future thing. So what does all that mean? What does all that mean in terms of the commissioner race? And why am I sharing a lot of that with you right now? People have told me they like my experience, and I do have the edge on experience. I've been 23 years as a Navy officer, as a professional leader and administrator and manager, and then I owned my own small business, my wife and I, for 9 years, after having been in business for 2 years as a hired gun, as a general manager of an outdoor retail store. I served as 8 years as a Buena Vista Town Trustee as an elected official, after being 3 years as the chair of the Chaffee County Visitors Bureau, and now I've been a Chaffee County Commissioner for 4 years. And being a commissioner, being one of 3, is much different than being one of 7 for 8 years on the Buena Vista Town Council. But the thing that I see right now, the thing that if you listen to business leaders and leaders everywhere, especially as we're going through this trial, the number one characteristic that they're looking for now and that is needed now is resiliency. Resiliency, being able to handle differing situations, being able to handle that broad spectrum of issues I talked about before, being able to look at different things from different perspectives and different points of view and assimilate those and try to craft consensus from people. It's like Dr. Martin Luther King said, great leaders don't wait for consensus, they shape consensus, they forge consensus. And that's something that resilient leaders need to do. Leaders can't be short-sighted, they can't be single, narrow issue focused. They have to look at the broad spectrum of things and look at where the county needs to go. They need a tomorrow mindset. They need to be looking at a recovery mindset. And they need to have that growth mindset. It's the growth mindset is we can't do something now, we just can't do it yet. We'll be able to do it tomorrow, and we need to be preparing to be able to do it. And so you need to be purpose motivated, you need to be task oriented, you need to be have a bias for action, and you need to make things happen. So with that, I will start taking your questions now. You can submit those via the chat function, and then they will be vectored on over to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you once again for being here. Thank you for spending your Saturday evening with us, and we won't take any longer than we have to.
Okay, Keith, we have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
This question is from Margaret Butler.
Okay.
Going forward, how do you see the pandemic affecting the ability of the county to carry out normal county functions with respect to budget and personnel? Will we have the money to do things citizens expect, such as law enforcement, road maintenance, public health, property records, tax collections, etc.?
Wow. That's a great question, Margaret, and thank you very much for that. You have, as you just listed in your question there's a broad array of services that the county provides and that the citizens justifiably expect the county to provide. That's what your tax dollars are going for. I guess the good news is our sales tax dollars have been pretty good even through this, because we do now collect sales tax on internet purchases. So we are getting some sales tax, even though people are not going to the stores quite as much as they were, or if they're perhaps ordering from the online presence of some of our in-county retailers, but we are able to collect some of that sales tax that way. Second thing is our property taxes are still going to be holding up pretty well. All indications are, and property taxes are the major source of our county and income for our service provision. There are a couple of areas which are cause for concern, and one is our Highway Users Trust Fund, HUTF. That's where much of our road and bridge budget comes from. Most of our road and bridge budget comes from HUTF dollars. And the less gasoline that's sold, the fewer HUTF dollars that are collected. And so the less Highway User Trust Fund dollars that come onto the county, which we can use for road maintenance. Now the good news is we get some payment in lieu of tax money, which you may have heard me speak about, called PILT. That is money that the federal government pays to counties with a lot of Forest Service land and public land, because we don't collect property tax on that land. So the federal government makes up for that difference by providing PILT dollars. And then we get some other money from a program called SRS, Secure Rural Schools. That's primarily earmarked to go to our local schools, so we don't do a lot of county-funded projects with that. So we do have resources of funding, and it doesn't look like, at least right now, that we're going to have to trim back on our scope of services that are being provided. We're also very good at getting grants and stepping up to the table with our own contribution that we have to make to get those grants. Grant writers or grantors want to see that a community has some skin in the game. So if you just go up with your hands out and say, we're not bringing any funds to the table, we want you to fund 100% of this project, then they're not very forthcoming with their grants. But with the community foundation that we have now and several other things, I'll talk a little bit more about the community foundation in a few minutes, but some of those things, we do have our own capacity, and the grant givers, our Department of Local Affairs, Great Outdoors Colorado, and others look more favorably when we bring some money to the table. So I hope that answered your question. The picture looks pretty good for the time being. There's a lot of dynamics going on right now, which are probably going to keep our property values up pretty robust, which also means that the property tax collections will be fairly robust as well. So thank you again, Margaret. Good question. Is something else?
We have a question from Nancy Best.
Okay.
How do we make our local elections nonpartisan so that candidates in local elections don't run as members of particular parties? Who is in charge of that?
That's a great question, Nancy, and that's something that, I don't know, I guess the state legislature does. And that probably, when you look at how these things are written, I think it's actually in statute, because there are things like, if you look at the ballot, you have the two major parties toss a coin or something to decide which candidates from those two major parties are first and second on the ballot, and then all other candidates come after that. All other minor parties, lesser parties, third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties, ever how you want to term that. So that's something that I'd have to research, but I'm assuming it would require something at the legislature. Now here's the problem with that. We both know that the legislature is highly dominated by the caucus system down in Denver. We've heard all of our representatives, just about all of our state senators say that the caucuses have lots of power. So I think that's why, being realistic about things at the state level, we're probably always going to see it be partisan elections. That's the way they are in California, but it's not until you get to the state house level that elections were by party in California. Everything, at least to my knowledge, even at the county level, best I remember, everything was still nonpartisan. But that's a good question. That's something we can work on. We'll talk a little bit more about how I kind of allocate my time management, how I kind of triage issues like that. If somebody asks that question, or if there's kind of a slow minute, and I can talk about that a little bit later. So thank you. That's a great question as well.
I would reiterate that you can put your comments in the, or your questions for Keith in the chat box, please.
Yeah, if you can send your questions via the chat function, that'd be great.
What issues do commissions deal with?
Ooh, there's a lot of issues that come before us. Many of them are defined by statute, and others are just practical sorts of matters. The two big ones that come up, or the two big ones that most people think of most frequently, are the budget, which we're going through right now. We've had our budget hearings where we've met with all our department heads and most of our key leaders in county government, and they say, this is what we accomplished this past year, and this is what we have as goals for our next year, and these are things that we need additional funds for, or we think we can keep our budget fairly flat. So the budget is one of the big ones. And the budget at a local level, and I said this as a Buena Vista Town trustee, and I've said it as a county commissioner, and I'll repeat it, and there's a saying that somebody used a few years ago, and somebody tried to make fun of him for saying it, but it actually makes a lot of sense. He said, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities. At the national level, the president's budget, the budget that gets delivered to Congress every year, that Congress always says is dead on arrival, is a political document. It isn't really a financial management document. It's a document which says, these are the priorities for the United States government. This is a representation of where we want to commit resources to accomplish the goals and dreams and visions of the American people. that's one of the first things I learned when I went through government budgeting and appropriations and allocations at one of the war colleges I attended, is that the president's budget isn't really a financial management document, it's a political document. But at the local level, at the town, at the municipal and county level, it's both. And that is a unique document. It both represents what the county is striving to achieve because it shows what we're committing resources to, and it's a financial management tool. And that makes it pretty tough. And that's why you have to have good financial managers like our financial officer, Dan Short, and his team. They do a great job of managing our budget. I don't know how they do it. I'm one of those guys that when I saw a classmate or somebody working on accounting homework, I got an instant headache. I'm not a finance guy, but I understand it, I can track it, and I can work with it. But that's one of the big things that we work on is budget. And how does that reflect what it is we're really trying to achieve, and balancing those dollars and managing your dollars, your taxpayer dollars, to get you the services that you want. And then the second big thing that most people think about is land use decisions. And those are applications for lot line adjustments. They are subdivision, major and minor subdivision applications. There's a term called subdivision exemption, which you may hear. And that doesn't mean that, what it means is you're exempt from going through the entire subdivision process because your lot that you're creating may be small enough, or some of the things that you're doing may exempt you from the broader, bigger process. Water issues, some of those things, but big time the land use issues. Sometimes we get involved with roads and bridge issues. If there's a right-of-way vacation, meaning that somebody wants us to vacate a right-of-way and deed it over to them. If there's an old road or an old platted road in one of our old mining, not mining claims, one of our old town sites like Nathrop or Maysville, then if there are lots adjacent to it, then they may want us to vacate that. So those are two of the big things. Personnel issues, we have a lot to do with managing the county government, the capital C county as an organization. We oversee lots of things there. We don't get into personnel supervision, but we do work on personnel policies and those sorts of things. So there's a broad panoply of issues. Intergovernmental relations, working with the municipalities to help them. We do a lot of resolutions of support, lots of letters of support. We work a lot with regional and state organizations, and we conduct liaison with our federal congressional delegations. So there's lots of different things, lots of stuff. That's a good question, and I could go on and on and on about that, but as you see, there's a broad array of stuff which is part of that need for resiliency. You might be in one role 1 minute, and then 5 minutes later, your phone rings, and you're into a different role very quickly. So thank you very much. Great question. Another question?
We have a question from Doug Welch. Following up on the job growth, the pandemic is moving many people to work from home.
Right.
In many areas, people are moving to small rural areas, and that is keeping property values up.
Yep.
One of the things driving that is access to high quality, reasonably priced internet. What can the county do to improve our internet?
That's a great question, Doug. And as you know, we've been working on that now for several years with our state representatives and our national level representatives. And that's something that I spend a good deal of time on, is broadband. We've made some incremental improvements, but we're nowhere near where we need to go for all the reasons your question outlined there, that more people are moving in. And you noted that's one of the reasons that we expect our property values to stay pretty strong, is because people are moving in, but a lot of those people who are moving in need to telecommute. We did have some, as I learned about a year or so ago, we were using the term redundancy a lot. And in lay terms, that made a lot of sense to me, and it still does. But what the broadband industry and broadband providers call it is protected networks, which means if somebody digs into a fiber optic cable like they did several years ago, several times, then and we lose everything. Well, now we have a protected network, or we have that redundancy, and we have alternative routes that we don't go dark and totally quiet on our internet if somebody does dig up a cable on one end of the county or outside the county or somewhere again. And so far we've been very lucky. One of my worst nightmares, I mean, you would not believe how scared I was when all this started in the middle of March, and I knew that we were going to be doing a lot of internet conferencing, a lot of go-to meetings, and now Zoom. Zoom seems to have kind of cornered the market around here, that somebody would dig up a cable or something would happen, we'd have a catastrophic failure, and we would be totally unable to do anything. Fortunately, we've been pretty lucky that way. So, what can we do? We can continue to hammer and make the point that you've just made so clearly about we need much better broadband now more than ever before. And we need, I mean, the schools are back in session, they're doing things remotely. That adds to the burden on our broadband networks. And the more and more that we do this stuff, and the more and more that people move in and we're reliant on broadband capacity, then the more imperative it is that we get something seriously done about it. Now here's something that all of us can do, and I've said it several times before, I've shared it on Facebook. I haven't done it as much lately as I should. But if you go to naco.org and do a search on there for Test IT, and I'll share this again on my Facebook page after we wrap up. But there's an app that you can get to download to your mobile device, your iPad, your telephone, what have you, and you can run broadband tests from your mobile device. It will tell you what your upload and download speeds are and whether or not they meet the FCC, the current FCC requirements. If you're in a null, if you're in a void, i.e. you don't have a signal, if you're in a place like St. Elmo or somewhere, it will log that you tried it, it will log that geographic position, and when you do get a signal, it will upload it. The reason this is so important is right now, the internet providers self-report. They tell Congress, they tell the FCC what they want to tell them, basically. And if they say, oh, we're doing great, that's what they report. And the FCC says, hey, they say they're doing great, so why should we put pressure on them? Now, I have had sitting members of Congress in a room with other people present when we rural county commissioners are back in Washington doing a legislative visit, and we're all thumping the table about rural broadband. I've had a sitting member of Congress say, well, they're Verizon, what do you want me to do? I'm like, you're a member of Congress. How can you say that? You're supposed to at least say you're going to fight for us. Don't say they're so big that you can't do anything, that you're powerless. I mean, what would some of the great legislators of yore say about that? And what would they do about it? So those are things that we continue to work on. I think you know that when we redid Cottonwood Pass and Gunnison County did their side, that the conduit is installed and there is fiber optic cable over there. Now that is primarily for the benefit of the western slope to get traffic out, but I'm reasonably confident that it would also be an alternative pathway for us to get traffic out, in or out, if we had another cable cut. Another little nuance that most people don't understand, let's picture this. You live down in the Nathrop area there, Doug. Let's think about 162 and 285. We just ran a fiber optic cable out to Mount Princeton Hot Springs Resort and Colorado Central Telecom and some others are going to capitalize on that opportunity. We're going to get fiber optic up to some point, and then someday we'll get it up to St. Elmo, because that is a huge human safety problem with not having a signal up there. But think there's a quadrant here, right? A census tract. This is 285, this is 162. If there's a house right there in that corner, one house, one customer right there in that corner, and there's 500,000 out here somewhere in the hustings, in the countryside. If the provider is providing service to that one house in this census tract, they get credit for that whole census tract for one house. 499,999 without any service. One with, that whole census tract is served. That's a problem, and that's something we have to work on. And that's something that I continue to work on. I wish I had done more. There's still tons and tons and tons to be done, but you have my commitment that I will keep working on that. That is a top priority, because it's a human safety priority. So thanks much.
Our next question is from Mary Silvestri.
Okay.
New home starts have been increasing over the past 5 years in Chaffee County. Home builders are not required to hold a contractor's license, which is optional in the state. How are the county commissioners going to assure people that the housing that is being built is of quality standards and up to code?
Great question, Mary, and that is something that I know you and I have discussed it in the past. We are able, as I understand it, I'm not expert on this, but there are some proposals in the state legislature to allow counties to license businesses, but I believe it may not be a business license at this point, but we can require contractor certifications at this point. But I know it's something that our building department and others are getting more and more requests to do something about, and more requests to discuss. And we have that on our agenda, we have that, and we are discussing it. I talked with some people on staff about that just last week. And so I have to be sure what we can do statutorily from the state level. There was a proposal in the state legislature last year about licensing businesses in general, and it had to do more with the VRBO marketplace than it did anything, and there were some changes made to that. So I'd have to get our legal team to give me a real good, firm assessment of that. But we'll continue talking with our building department and others, and I've got that on my radar and on my list. So don't let me forget about it, and I know you won't. Thank you.
We have a question from Libby Fay.
Okay.
How much time do you spend on your commissioner duties?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't keep track. It's again, I guess one of the benefits of a Navy career is you're on duty 24/7, even to a certain extent, when you're on leave. So I don't really think about it that much. I mean, there are times, I'll admit, I'm only human. If I'm home here and my phone rings or something, I go, ah! But generally speaking, I go to work when I wake up in the morning, which is pretty early. I'm an early riser, and I'm kind of working to one degree or another until I go to bed at night, which I do go to bed kind of early because I do get up early. I turn my phone off then, but otherwise I figure you guys are counting on me to do a job for you, and I'm here at your beck and call and your convenience. So if it's 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, that's the first opportunity you have to call me, I'm fine with that. If it's Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, we do attend church services right now by internet, so I'll probably let it go over to voicemail, but I try to get back to people. But I don't know. I'd say, I don't know if I was allocating everything and keeping a timesheet, probably 80 hours a week, but there again, that's just a guesstimate. Because there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. There's a lot of latency, you know, there's a lot of studying to prepare for a meeting, and then background stuff. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to do as much filing the last few months as I'd like, so some of that time is just wasted looking for a document that should be able to just go find quite easily, to be honest. So I'd say 80 hours a week on average. Thanks.
We have another question from, I believe it's Facha Lauda, so I apologize, Facha, if I pronounced it incorrectly. She asked that you please address the Nestle 1041 renewal pros and cons.
Well, once again, I can't do that, Zvada. That's because that is a pending application. And I have to, I mean, it's a great question, and I understand it's in the forefront of everybody's thinking. It's, but because it is a pending application, I can't really discuss it because there are due process concerns. Even if I was absolutely certain that there was somebody from Nestle on this call and they would hear everything I'd say, everything I'd hear, all the different interplay and all the exchanges, I shouldn't do that at this point. But it does give me an opportunity to mention. We are having the public hearings on October 20th at the fairgrounds, on the evening of October 20th, and those will be out via Zoom as well. We're going to ask that people sign up to attend because of social distancing considerations. It'll be in the exhibition hall, which is also known as the South Building over by the rodeo arena, the main building. And we'll have people in there, and then we'll allow people to be over in the North Building and be over there. And if they want to come over and testify, then they can come over and do that. We're going to have monitors set up for people to watch and listen to the proceedings over in the North Building. So that's that first evening. Nestle will make their presentation. We do have presentation opportunities for groups if they want to. There's an application process we outline in the public notice. And if you need that, email me and I'll go over all this stuff out of contact here before we wrap up. But I can get that information to you. And then, see, that's on Tuesday night, Tuesday evening, October 20th. And then because of work schedules and people's lives and so forth, we're going to have another session on Thursday morning, the 22nd, which begins at 9 a.m. and it'll be run generally the same way, minus those presentations. There won't be a presentation from Nestle, and there won't be any other group presentations, but we'll take additional public input then. So I can talk about that process and procedural stuff, but the merits and so forth I can't address right now. But thank you very much for that question, and thank you for your interest in that, because I understand it's a big, big topic. Yes, sir.
I have a question from Sandra Hobbs.
Okay.
You've stated that you consider the county attorney to be the fourth county commissioner. Can you elaborate on why you believe that?
I've never said that. I have heard that other people have said that. And that's really the first time I've ever heard anybody say that I even think that, because I don't think that. Our county attorney is not an elected official. Our county attorney is not accountable to the taxpayers and the voters. I listen to the county attorney, I'll be honest with you. But there are times that I have not taken the county attorney's advice 100%. No, I do not think the county attorney is a fourth county commissioner. I never have, and I never will. But thank you for the opportunity to address that.
I have a question from Allison Brown.
Okay.
Can you give an example of where you disagreed with the other county commissioners and why you voted against them?
Well, there was one not too terribly long ago where I made a motion on appointments to the Planning Commission, and I was reasonably certain that it wouldn't get a second, but I went ahead and made it anyway. There was an occasion when we were talking about Centerville Ranch when, now this wasn't an official vote, and by the way, Allison, thank you for that question, it's a good question, that there was a straw poll taken, and the question was, if we voted right now, how would you vote? And I said I'd vote against it as it was at that time, but we didn't take a vote at that time. And then we worked on the issue, worked on the topic for several more hours, and it came to somewhere where the final motion, or where the final resolution we were about to vote on was something I could live with. So I did vote for it after that. And I think with Centerville Ranch, I think we're seeing a reasonable outcome where you know, the property owner is able to get a profit, and the community is the development's going to be something that the community can live with and accept. And there have been a couple of others where we've had split votes, not many. I talked about this the other night in a different group. We generally, you know, work together and iron out things so that we get to a point that it's something that you know, we can all live with and be on principle about. And then I'm sure there've been a couple of others that where we had a split vote and I was in the minority.
I have a question from Libby Fay, another. What are the 5 most important issues for Chaffee County, and how are you prepared for these issues?
Okay, great question. Again, looking to the future there. Well, I think number one is recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and positioning ourselves for a robust recovery. And then that implies certain implementing tasks or additional fundamental tasks, which I would say, you know, recovery is kind of job one, and then some of these other things are 2 through 5 that you mentioned there. Helping our current businesses survive, because once again, these aren't liquidity problems, these are solvency problems. I know our restaurants, which employ a lot of our service workers, as a guy said to me early on in this, and I heard it other times, nobody opens a restaurant with a business plan based on 30% table rate. It won't work. So we have to figure out some way, and if that's working through lobbying with our congressional delegation primarily, because the state can't print money, but figuring out additional ways to provide relief funds and having variances so that we can accommodate that separation, so that we can keep the public health aspects in place and keep these restaurants solvent, not just for the business owners. I mean, people hear us say this sometimes, they go, well, all you're worried about is the business owners. I am concerned about the business owners, but I am equally concerned about their employees, because these people rely on those businesses for their jobs and their livelihood. And if they can't make a living, then, you know, we're in deep, deep trouble indeed. And so I'd say the jobs and those elements of the recovery, and making sure that we can keep wages at a decent level and doing everything that we can to be able to do that. And then having the training programs. I know there are people here in the county right now, and perhaps a couple of them are on this call, I hope they are, that are working on getting vocational technical education here in Chaffee County. I'm a huge supporter of that. Some of you may have read the profile of me on Ark Valley Voice the other day. My mom became an LPN by going to a local VOTEC school. And that local VOTEC school trained a lot of my relatives and a lot of people that I know in skills like welding and construction trades and others. We need that capacity here. Now, we don't have the rooftops. I'm sure there are rules of thumb or there are benchmarks that say you have to have this many people to have a VOTEC school. But somehow or another, we can work with CMC, we can work with our business community, our construction community, and our trades communities to have some sort of apprenticeship training and VOTEC training here to give people something else to look forward to other than just the direct service industry. I'd say the other thing is broadband, yet again, because there are people moving in. As Doug Welch's question mentioned, people are leaving places like the cities. It's almost like this reverse flow. People were moving into the cities, and now a lot of people who have the means and have second homes are now moving out into more rural areas because they're concerned about some of the things that are going on in our urban centers. And they're concerned about the transmissibility of diseases and stuff. And that's going to have implications on our schools. There are places like Telluride and Vail and Aspen that are the kind of the early, the canaries in the coal mine in situations like this, where people who can afford just to pick up and move have done so. And a lot of these people are senior executives, and the stereotype years ago was primarily male, but now there are also lots of women that have these senior C-level positions and can telecommute, and they have second families, or in some cases they have their first round of children, and they're bringing those children with them, and those children are going into our schools, which are built for X number of students, and now we're going to have X plus number of students by these people moving in to take up permanent residency in their second home. So I guess kind of run that down again. The recovery and jobs and training, vocational and technical skills, broadband, and our schools. I think those are things that we really need to work on. That requires a little bit of shift of focus on things that we've looked at in the past couple of years. But some of the good news is the reason that we're able to look at some of those things now is because we've accomplished some of the other things that were on our list, that were high on our list, like a community foundation, like getting Chaffee Common Ground in place and up and running, and some of these other programs and projects. So, now that we've completed some of those, we put some more things on our list. Your list never gets shorter, it just gets different. So thanks, great question. Yes, sir.
Dan Smith asked, can you touch on Red's mixed paving and concrete expansion?
Oh no, that's another one that I can't really talk about in any detail, but thanks for that question, Dan. I know that's another one that's right up there in public interest, especially people that live over there in that part of the city of Salida and that area of the county up on Methodist Mountain. But that's one I can't really address or talk about in any detail because of the ex parte concerns, and it could conceivably come before the county commissioners. I don't want to risk my impartiality and have to recuse myself on that. Procedurally, a little bit on that, the BLM is taking comment. I think they extended their deadline, and they are still taking comment. And if you need the website, BLM and the Forest Service take all their input now via the internet, and touch wood, it's still working. It's called eplanning.gov is the tool, but I've got the specific website, and if you need me to get that link to you, I can. Just send me an email at the end of this. I'll go ahead and give you my email address now in case somebody needs to sign off or something. It's kbaker@chaffeecounty.org. And that's the general convention for our county email addresses is first initial, last name @chaffeecounty.org. If you know somebody's name is, Ted Brown, and put tbrown@chaffeecounty.org, and there's a 99% chance it will get to that individual. So kbaker@chaffeecounty.org. So thank you, great question, and I know I know a lot of people are very interested in it, and I just have to be rather circumspect. Thank you. Yes, sir.
John Prey asked, do you have a position regarding the Chaffee County Patriots group, as it seems local police are involved in this group?
Oh, I don't have a real position on it because I don't know that much about them or about the group. I just know what people have told me, and I haven't done a lot of investigating on it. I know that I read some of the things that were on Ark Valley Voice a couple of days ago, and I read some of the statements that some of the members of law enforcement and law enforcement leadership made. So I have to take them at their word on those statements. And as always, I think my colleague Commissioner Felt said, we're always available to listen to law enforcement and to help them with their missions and their jobs and provide them whatever support they need. And I know there's lots of speculation in the community, and it's like anything else. Wherever there's a lack of clarity or a lack of information, then a lot of times speculation occupies the vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, whether it's informational or whether it's in space. And I'd hope that that group does start doing some outreach and public relations to reassure people that their motives are good and that people's worst concerns and worst considerations aren't manifest or aren't on somebody's agenda or another. So that's really all I have right now on that. I'm sure I'll learn more as the days and weeks proceed and progress. But thank you for that question, and we'll be in touch. Let's keep the communications going. If there are any members of that group on here and they would like to talk with me and tell me more about it and everything, then I'm all ears. I'm equally available to them as I am anybody else. And I'm going to give you my phone number a little bit, just like I did I'll do it right now, in fact, just like I did my email address. It's 719-963-4164, 719-963-4164. And I said if I can answer, I do. If I'm tied up or busy or asleep, it goes over to voicemail, but I return calls pretty quickly. And you can also text me on that number. So, thank you. Yes, sir.
We have another question from Libby Fay. What long-term effects do you expect from the pandemic?
Oh, well, I think there's going to be a lot of lifestyle changes, and I think there's going to be lots of different things that we do differently. But there are some things that I mentioned a little bit. My crystal ball is not the best in the world, but I do try to look out when cars used to have hood ornaments, down the road from the hood ornament, or out past the bow of the ship, and look downrange quite a ways and try to think about what do we need to do to prepare for the eventualities that anybody, even me, can see forthcoming. So if there are going to be some vacant commercial buildings, how can we repurpose those so that they're not just sitting vacant and they're not dark? And I think a near-term sort of thing is perhaps trying to address some of the homeless issues that we are probably, sadly, going to see more of. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine back east a couple of days ago, and he was asking me, do we have a homeless problem? I said, not in the sense you're thinking of, not in the sense he was thinking of, like panhandlers downtown hassling people and trying to get money from them, or a large number of people hanging around the bus station or a mission. But we do have problems. They're just different problems. There are people living on public lands, and when they leave their detritus and stuff behind. But we need some place to shelter those people, and we need some way to put them in a transitional program so that we can help find them a job, provide them with job skills. And there was a member of, Senator Phil Graham from Texas years ago. He said, getting up on time is a job skill. Taking a shower in the morning and getting dressed is a job skill. getting to work on time is a job skill. That was back in the mid-90s when everybody was saying, well, let's make them all a computer operator. Well, not everybody can be or needs to be a computer operator. So if we can develop something similar to, once again, La Puente, the bridge in Alamosa, or some other transitional program that does give people real skills. And now with Sol Vista's Regional Assessment Center coming along, that'll enable us to provide more substance abuse treatment programs and opportunities for people that genuinely do want to clean up and better themselves. Then I think that's something. Then there's no telling what, there are probably some markets that are likely to go away just because people are not going to be doing things the way they were before. I've heard that there's going to be, REI, I think they built a new campus up in Seattle. I don't think they're ever even going to occupy it. I think it went straight onto the market. Who are they going to sell it to? Is anybody's guess, because there are probably going to be declining requirements for office space. Some of these other commercial facilities, if you say, okay, Amazon and even grocery providers and others are going to be having smaller nodes in more remote areas for distribution sites. We might have something like that be able to locate here. We've got these drone deliveries that they're talking about, small package deliveries. I think we're going to see some of that come to fruition a lot faster than we ever thought. We do have a good intersection here with 285 and 50 and 24. So if you look at it in terms of filling in the areas between where the big interstates are, I think we're in a good position to be a sub-regional distribution center. I think we're in a good position to be a regional meeting area for people that want to come from Alamosa, Fairplay, Gunnison, Canyon, and others. I think we're centrally located there. This might give us an opportunity to really get behind and push some of the things that we're doing with the fairgrounds. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we're branding that now Fairgrounds and Events Center. And Mickey Hodge is our marketing director out there, and she's doing a great job. And it's kind of like that task list a while ago. The fairgrounds has been busy for a long time. Now we just want to kind of change the character of what we're seeing there and have more profitable events coming in there. So those are some things I can see at the local level that we can be engaged in and try to make happen and shape policies to make those things happen. Yes, sir. Any others?
Yes, Sandra Hobbs said if you didn't state that Jenny Davis acts as fourth county commissioner, can you say who it was?
I think it was a former county commissioner several years ago said it in jest, or someone said it to that county commissioner and he reported it. And that's about as far as I'll go on that. I don't even remember enough of that conversation to even attribute it to anybody, even if I wanted to attribute it. But I think the way that I heard it, because I have heard that, I'm totally honest, because that's the only way I know how to be. I barely keep my own honest story straight without having to juggle things. But this guy said that somebody mentioned to him one time, I didn't know you had a fourth county commissioner, and that was in reference to the county attorney. So.
I have a question from Allison Brown.
Okay.
When you work together and iron out with other commissioners so you can agree on voting, how do you assure the sunshine laws are met and citizens are informed on your decision making?
Good question. Well, we do that in open meetings. We don't talk about things beforehand, like in the hallways or on the phone or anything. I've always been very conscientious about sunshine laws, and I've never found them to be constraining. I found them to be restraining. They keep me from doing things I shouldn't do, but I've never found them to keep me from being able to make a good decision and to discuss things and, staying within there. I mean, I know if I had an application or I had an issue in front of the Board of County Commissioners, I'd want it to be treated right and by the rules and in accordance with the sunshine laws. So I've always followed them. And we have I've never felt an inability to express my positions and my values and what I'm trying to represent and my points of view in an open meeting. And I guess that's why they call them sunshine laws. If it's something that you're unwilling to say in a public meeting, or you don't feel you have the evidence or the logic or reason on your side to say it in a public meeting, then perhaps you shouldn't say it. And if it doesn't get said, then it shouldn't really factor into the decision because it's not presented into evidence and it's not available to everyone there. So that's how I do it. And, that's speaking for myself. And most of my experience, I believe that's the way everybody else does business too. So, thank you.
Susan, I believe it's Nice.
Yeah.
Wants to hear your thoughts on housing issues.
Well, that's a good question. Somebody was asking me about decision making, and some of you who've attended county commissioner meetings have probably heard me say this before. I have some very basic cognitive aids, decision-making aids. Eisenhower had his quadrants. It was like every day, supposedly, he took a legal pad and did a big plus on it. And there was high importance strategic, and then there was low importance strategic, and and then finally you had this quadrant which was like, okay, these are things down here, these aren't really worth doing. So one of my decision-making aids, and many of you have heard of this, is called Maslow's Hierarchy of Human Needs. It's Maslow's Pyramid, it's also called. And it's a triangle, and the very base, the bottom of it, are things like survival needs. And those are things like air and water and food and shelter and things that we humans need, because we can't live like Neanderthals anymore. We lost that a long time ago. And then you go on up, you have, to self-esteem. And then finally the peak is self-actualization. And that's where you can engage in artistic pursuits, you can work on music, you can do whatever it is that fulfills you. Now here's a key part of understanding Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. You can't move up to the next level until you've satisfied the level underneath it. If you're worried about food, if you're worried about your next breath of air, if you're worried about where your next drink of water is coming from, if you're worried about freezing to death at night because you have inadequate shelter, then getting a job and being productive and earning a living wage isn't, you're not really concerned about that. That comes next. So housing is very high on my priority list for people because of that. Because I agree that it is a basic fundamental human need. If it's a 8-degree night and you have no shelter at all, or even if you're living in your car, that's tough. That's living rough. So that's why I didn't really do much on this. It's like anything else. This is kind of something that happens at a senior management level or a commissioner level, is you don't do all that much. You're not a wrench turner, you don't drive nails, you don't do any of those other honorable sorts of things. But what you do is you keep conversations going. You get the right people together. So about 3 years or so ago, a young lady who lived here in the county at that time, Michael Ann Lee, got very concerned because we had some nights that were very cold. And she was very concerned about people without shelter. And she said, we need to do something. And so what I did was got the right people together in the right room in the Tauber building. And those were people like Rob White, Michael Real, Andrea Carlstrom, Michael Ann, and a lot of people that I should remember, but I don't really remember all that clearly. And they got to work, and they came up with the idea of a code blue shelter is what they're known as. And that means on nights where the forecast temperature is going to be 32 degrees or lower, then we activate the code blue shelter. And that is done through Loaves and Fishes, or the food bank down there. Lindy Gibbous, who works there, or worked there, I guess she still does, was very instrumental in making that happen. And so that was something we did as an emergency shelter. In terms of longer term fixes for housing, we have the Chaffee Housing Trust, which Reed McCullough has been working for and with for several years now, and they help get grants to help facilitate people to either rent housing or get on an ownership track for housing, like in the farm up here at BV, Two Rivers Crossing down in Salida, and developing some more opportunities. And I think, Susan, you know perhaps that we did hire a housing director, I guess 2 years ago, Becky Gray, who came to us from Pittsburgh, Kansas. She's been a gem. She was the perfect find on this. She's highly motivated, she cares about it, she studies it, she works on it, and she's helping us tremendously with identifying funding opportunities and novel ways to use funding. Like the El Pomar Foundation gave us a grant to provide the initial security deposit for renters to get into rental housing. We did get some grants through Chaffee, the Colorado Housing and Financing Authority, to help with some rehabilitation work on a property in Poncha and add some additional housing there. But we're just getting started. And this, back to preparing for the future and anticipating events and trying to get ahead. There's a term from aviation which has entered mainstream conversation now, ahead of the power curve, and getting ahead of the problem. And I understand I'm not casting an aspersion on anybody who preceded me, because we had a recession to deal with in 2008. But if you can start dealing with things several years before you actually need them, you'll be much better off. And if we had been able to have started dealing with the housing issue in a serious way 12, 15 years ago, we'd be much better off. And that's why we're kind of chasing the solution here. Yeah, we're still behind. And with what's going to happen with property values, I mean, we certainly don't, nobody wants to see their property drop. They wish their property taxes would drop many times, but they don't want their property values to drop. And we don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that. That's one of the ways to wealth in America, building multi-generational wealth, which is one reason housing is so important. But it's not going to get any better without increasing our inventory and increasing stock. And our comprehensive plan update takes a look at that. Our land use code, which comes out, which we'll work on after the comprehensive plan. We want to take some very decisive measures to implement policies to help address our housing stock situation there. So I guess to try to tie all that up, because I did ramble some, I'll admit it, it's a broad topic, and it's one that, a lot of stuff going on up here sometimes. Housing is a basic fundamental need, and it's something that policy can help with. Right now, I don't see our housing program getting into government building housing, but our job is to implement policies and help facilitate programs that help the private sector address those housing needs, and we need to address our inventory. We may have some opportunities coming up with some properties which are unfortunately going to be vacated because of the pandemic and the economic fallout from that. And whatever we can do to help make those happen, we will. Some of those will be the transitional homeless sorts of things. But for more longer lasting housing, we need to keep working on those programs. That is a big priority because it's at the bottom of the pyramid. So thank you, great question.
John Prey asked, is there a process to keeping heavy trucking off of First Street in Salida?
Great question, John, and the answer is yes, maybe, sort of. I've picked this up with CDOT, and I know that David Lady has. I know that Drew, hang on, I'm having a senior moment. Your city manager, Drew. I know Glenn, and I know PT have. But it's under the state patrol's purview, oddly enough, because that truck traffic comes under their port of entry division or their port of entry branch. So we have to get the state patrol to make a decision on that. And they haven't really tried to evade the issue or anything. It's just not one of their top priorities right now. Now, we all thought that it would take a long-term fix at the northern intersection out at US 50 and 285 in Poncha Springs, where they just put the new light in. That's the temporary fix. The long-term fix, the design phase, is a big roundabout like you often see in Europe and Canada. Well, every place except the US, I guess. But so that trucks can, it's big enough for trucks to get through, and it keeps traffic moving, and there aren't backups and all those other sorts of things. But CDOT says that's really not a consideration. As far as they're concerned, they could do it tomorrow. But the answer is that that's something that the county, because it does go through the city of Salida, it's really the city of Salida's to do, we're working in support. So, whenever it comes up or whenever there's an opportunity, I know the city leadership brings it up. I don't want to imply that it's not a priority with them, because it is. And every opportunity that they have to bring it up, I know they do. And if they feel like the state patrol or CDOT is not being responsive to that, then that's when they say, hey Keith, can you make a couple of calls on our behalf and try to elevate this a little bit and let them know that we're serious about it. I know we do hear a lot about it. And I've been down there, patronizing some of the coffee shops and businesses and eateries there. And yeah, it can get bad, really, in the summertime, especially when there's a lot of road construction going on.
We have another question from Allison Brown.
Okay.
County ethics rules require that county board members recuse themselves from decisions regarding nonprofits or other organizations that they are involved with. These rules have not been followed by the Chaffee Common Ground board members. Why?
Excellent question, and any ethics question is always an excellent question. Let me say that. If anybody has, whether or not there's concerns, or whether or not it turns out to be true or whatever, an ethics question to me is always important. People need to have confidence in their government. I know there was a story in the local paper a couple of days ago about the structure of the board and how Common Ground is organized and everything. So I know that's something that we're taking additional looks at. I did ask, I just noticed my glasses are really glaring there, so I apologize. I wear glasses. I really don't need them except for reading glasses, but I had some glasses made because I didn't like this look. So my apologies for the glare issue there. That's something that I think, because there are public questions about it, we need to examine it And if there are things that we could do better for the optics, then we certainly need to take a look at that. I'm not stipulating that there are improprieties, but it's something that if the public does have questions about it and there are concerns and considerations, then those are questions that we need to look at and we need to answer, and we need to be very forthright about it. So thank you, good question.
Dan Smith asked for you to talk about the COVID task force here that has been held up as an example for the state, the cooperation between agencies.
Okay, great question. It's something that, well, honestly, Dan, to me, it was not that exceptional because the culture that I spent my career in the Navy, we had several gatherings or small meetings, big meetings, generally every day, especially underway. We had what were called quarters when you got your people together. We had a document called the Plan of the Day that we went over, that we read to them. And then in the evening, the executive officer got all the department heads together and the senior enlisted personnel to talk about the activities that their departments had during the day and what they accomplished, just to keep the squadron, the ship, the command running, and those sorts of things. And in the business world where I spent time, you had some fairly frequent updates. But it's kind of different for the county governments, and it is a bit unique for us. And I was kind of sort of scratching my head because there did seem to be a lot of interest from other counties, like, well, what are you guys doing? How is it you're doing this? How are you coordinating policy and activities and making sure that BV is doing something? It isn't at wide variance with what the county is doing, and that public health has this policy in place, and then Salida or Poncha Springs does something, or the school districts do something, that they're not coordinated, that they're not synchronized. And I was talking to one of Senator Bennett's staff people one day, because they have their regions and they have their different counties, and she said, no, they don't do that. And I thought, how do they function? And she said, they don't. That's, they're all kind of at cross purposes and stuff, and things just don't work well. So this is something that, I give my colleague, Commissioner Felt, a lot of credit for, because he's the chairman. He has the position to do this, and he started convening these meetings, and we have throttled back on how frequently we're having them right now, but they're wide open. They're Zoom meetings, and you can get on them. They're public meetings. There aren't any real decisions made there, but they're still open, and you can get to the link on them from the county website page. But the fire districts are there, the school districts are there, EDC has representation there, members of the business community sit in, and we have, it's kind of scripted, a menu of how we do reports, but we cover pretty much the gamut of things. But the foci are the public health picture, because back in February, when Andrea Carlstrom, our public health director, and her team have done a fantastic job. And I know they catch a lot of flack sometimes. That comes with the neighborhood, but they've continued to do that which is best for the citizens and residents of Chaffee County. And but when we first started talking about this in February, I said, job one is public health. Even then, people were saying, well, we can't do anything that harms the economy. And I said, there is no economy when you're dead. And so job one is public health. So we address public health issues. We talk about where we are at the state level. We talk about what the feds are doing or not doing, as the case may be, and what our response is. And then we also talk about business, because we do want to have a viable economy. We do want to keep our businesses from getting into that insolvency territory, if at all possible, and we do want them to be positioned for a robust recovery once we get there. So that's the way that those work. But now this brings up an interesting point, and this is something that I really want to do when I talk about policies and procedures and programs and those other sorts of things, to memorialize in a second term. The list doesn't get shorter, it just gets different. And we have done, I think, let's pat ourselves on the back a little bit, this team of commissioners and the teams in the municipalities and our school boards, our fire protection districts, the EDC, and several others, and our citizens councils, our citizens advisory committees. I think we've done a good job over the past 3 or 4 years with what I call interagency coordination and collaboration. But what we need to do is write a manual, and it doesn't have to be thick, it's just some general guidelines about how to operate in a multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency environment to coordinate policy and make sure that things don't get all balled up and you're working at cross purposes so that things are synchronized. Best easy example people can usually remember, Public Works or Roads and Bridges goes out and paves a road, paves a street. Nice, beautiful, hot mix asphalt. Oh, it's so smooth, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. And then what's the next thing that happens? Somebody rushes out there. They just can't help themselves. They rush out there and dig it up. We'll have an open trench policy, have all those sorts of things, and do everything that you can to synchronize activities so that when you pave a street, you put all those underground utilities, you put the upgrades in there, you do that sort of stuff, so the next thing that happens isn't somebody comes out there and digs it up. That's just an illustration. So that's what those afternoon meetings, they're at 4 p.m. on Mondays and Thursdays now. They are scheduled, and and the assumption is they're going to happen. If we don't need to have them because everybody's very busy and it does tie up a lot of people, then it's controlled by negation. Then we cancel it, and we usually put the word out. But if you log on and nobody's there, then just hang around for a couple of minutes. But it's not like you're spending your whole afternoon there to find out about it. I hope that answers your question. If you have any more questions or anything about how that works, and that's kind of the world in which I grew up career-wise and in Washington. It's really amazing. I know Washington, it's cool to be down on Washington, and there's certain reasons that you should be. And there's certain places that like Capitol Hill doesn't function as well as it should. But trust me on this. The people like my sister-in-law who worked at Department of Agriculture, the people like me who worked at the Pentagon, the vast overwhelming number of civilians who work in the federal government are there every day to do the best possible job they can for the American citizens and the public that they serve. And sometimes they get frustrated, they get stymied, and it just doesn't work as good as it should. But I rarely encountered the stereotypical people like you see on the West Wing and some of these other shows that are just there, that are totally power hungry, and they only have their own personal motives at heart. Most of the people I worked with were very good people, and they were making less money than they could have in the private sector. So that's interagency coordination and collaboration. That's something I think we're doing a very good job of, and I want to make sure that we memorialize that in some way so that the people who follow, if they don't have a lot of experience working in an environment like that, there's something they can go reference to and say, oh, this is how you do it. So thank you. Appreciate that question. Yes, sir.
Libby Fay asked, is the recent 0.25% county sales tax being used effectively?
Which, is that is that common ground, or is that, I get my tax, Is that?
I'm not positive.
Let's see, because marijuana excise tax is an excise tax, so that's not the 1/4%. I'm pretty sure she's talking about common ground. And common ground, if you remember, there was a ballot initiative for that. I'm checking the clock here. We got 25 minutes. Common ground has 3 real programs that it goes for. There's 3 broad avenues that it goes for. And one is to help keep production agriculture lands in production ag. And that's a relatively short way of saying that we realize that our production ag is a community value that people want. It also provides a lot of wildlife habitat. It provides wildlife migration corridors. It provides a lot of aquifer recharge. And our ag lands do a lot ecologically that sometimes people don't appreciate. Plus, it helps produce protein for the country. I know there are people that think, okay, shouldn't be eating meat, shouldn't be eating beef, but there are a lot of people who do. And it's an important part of our economy, and it's an important part of our culture. Second thing is forest health and watershed health. Watershed health isn't the big thing in capital letters, it's mainly forest health. But if you look at things ecologically, then watershed health is an important part of that, because our forests are where our source water for drinking water and lots of other things originate. So that's the second thing. And then in with that comes wildfire mitigation and several other elements. And then the third thing is trying to mitigate the impacts of outdoor recreation. Because I know we've all seen our trailheads are overrun. We're 2.5 hours from the Front Range, and despite the governor and everybody saying don't go to the mountains during the stay-at-home period, we were being overrun every weekend, and people were very concerned about it. And we were telling the governor, look, you got to do more than just say something at a press conference once a week. But there are human impacts for that. Not nice to think about. It's a rather delicate subject, but human waste is one of the biggies around our trailheads, around our campgrounds, around other things. Nobody wants to see remnants of toilet paper along the trails. Nobody wants to see even worse than that in places. I mean, dog poop's one thing, human poop's kind of at a whole order of magnitude more of indelicacy and things we don't like to think about. But human waste, not just the trash, that's another part of the problem. Back to the homeless situation. When people go up and live on the BLM and the Forest Service and other sorts of things, then that compounds the issues. So those are 3 things those are the 3 broad topic areas. The way it works is people make funding requests, and then they're vetted, and then those funds are allocated. So the things that I've seen thus far that we have put the final approval on, I think are effective uses of it, and they do take that ecological approach. One of the things that we really benefited from, going back to the Marijuana Excise Tax Advisory Board, the Community Foundation, these are things that some of us wanted for a long time. My personal case was a community foundation. When I was working with the Climax Community Investment Fund application review team, these people would come in from Summit County and Eagle County, and they'd have this application, and they'd say, oh, the Summit County Foundation is in for $75,000. The Vail Valley Foundation is in for $50,000 or something. And I was going like, well, what's the Summit County Foundation? Or what's the Vail Valley Foundation? And people said, well, that's their community foundation. What's a community foundation? And they told me all about it. And so I came back and said, we need a community foundation. It's hard to compete when these other counties are saying, or these other programs or applicants are saying, our county foundation, our community foundation is putting in $75,000, $50,000, whatever, and Chaffee County applicants we don't have that. The problem that we had then was we didn't have anybody with the expertise to put the programs together. I certainly didn't know how to do it. I'd say, hey, this is a nice to have, but then in terms of getting those right people in the right room to make the magic happen, we didn't have them. Then at Envision one day, we're sitting there around the table, and there's Rick Hum, there's Michael Harrington, there's Wendy Hall, there's Sidney Schnurr. There are people who have had experience with community foundations in starting these things up. And turns out Rick Hum not only had been the executive director of Great Outdoors Colorado, he was the founding director of what's now the Summit Foundation. Michael Harrington was the founding director of the Pikes Peak Foundation. So now we had this tremendous personnel resources with the skills up here and the knowledge up here to make this stuff happen. So when we established the Marijuana Excise Tax Advisory Board, we had the expertise of people like Herb Brody, who spent his life in data assessment for educational processes. We had Molly Brown, we had Jane Whitmer, we had Rick Hum, we had several people I forget. Unfortunately, Dan Short was involved as our finance director. David Henson was involved as our human services director. We had a true dream team of who you want for your first board of directors. And what Rick was able to do was come up with these scoring rubrics, which gives bonus points to things like aquifer recharge. So what to you or me looks like an ag project, he could evaluate, or the scoring rubric could look like for all the collateral benefits like aquifer recharge, wildlife habitat, wildlife migration corridor, wildfire buffering, all those other sorts of things. And then Rick stepped down from the METAB board and went over to the Chaffee Common Ground board and took those same rubric design skills. And Herb Brody was very strong in that, and I'm sure there are probably a couple of other people. Let's see. Sterling Stoudemeyer is very good at that sort of stuff too. And he was involved with the Marijuana Excise Tax Advisory Board. So ways to score these things in multiple avenues to make sure that they do have broader benefits. So sometimes somebody may have a great, worthy project, he just doesn't score as high because it doesn't have those other broader reaching benefits. So from what I've seen so far, I think the money is being spent effectively. And as our community gets better at writing these applications and envisioning these projects, then the projects will get better. And so the effectiveness and the efficiency of those dollars will increase. So it's an upward spiral. It's continual process improvement, as you may have heard in quality management and some of those other things. There's somewhere on my website or something about it's doing the best job you can today, understanding that it may not be major league quality yet, but do the best you can today and do better tomorrow and do better after that and better after that and just keep getting better. That's what builds great communities, and that's what will keep making Chaffee County an even better place to live. Yes, sir.
Dan Smith asks, what should the county's priorities be over the next 5 years?
Well, this is kind of back to the thing I was talking about before. Right now, we have to deal, supposedly, the First Nations people up in Canada and Alaska have a term about the wolf closest to the sled, or that you have to honor the nearest threat. And right now, the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, is still the most imminent threat, and we have to deal with that. That has to be our focus of effort for the near term. And until we get a vaccine, and until we get that broad community immunity that we have to go about our normal lives, because I'm not super crazy about wearing this all the time. I do, and as a practical matter, Westerners have always worn bandanas and things, and buffs were popular before this came along. But I think the top priority is the health, and then those collateral effects of that. When I say health, I also include mental health and emotional well-being. There are people, actuarial types or whatever, if you go back and look at natural disasters like the Fukushima disaster after the earthquake a few years ago in Japan, there are predictive factors where you can look out where some of these human needs and what, I'm not unique in this, I probably heard somebody say it, probably heard somebody use the term before I did, deaths of despair and illnesses of despair, like alcoholism, drug abuse, spousal abuse, domestic partner abuse, all these sorts of things. We have to anticipate those, and we have to prevent them to the extent we possibly can. And when prevention fails, we have to be able to deal with those in the best way that we possibly can. We have to understand that we are probably going to have some of that fallout. There's probably going to be effects on our minor children, and we don't want to see that. We're going to do everything we possibly can to prevent that, but when it does happen, our human services team has to be prepared to deal with it, and I know they are. They do an amazing job, and something we as county leaders have to think about. We have to think about them. We have to think about their welfare. We have to think about compassion fatigue or treatment fatigue, whatever it is with them, because they see a lot of the same problems day after day after day. And you get into this business a lot of times thinking, I'm going to cure this. We're going to fix it. And if you're not careful, you can do grave harm to your own emotional well-being, or you decide to get out of the work and when you could still be doing positive things. So we have to be concerned about our own team and our own people. It's kind of like being an effective leader in whatever world you're in. One of your top tasks is to take care of your people, and because they're the people that really do the work that you're tasked with accomplishing. Your people are key, so we have to remember them. And then housing continues to be, we're still behind the power curve with that one, so that's something that we're still going to work on, and it's probably going to get worse. Let's be honest about that. With the economic fallout from the pandemic, it's probably going to get worse. We have to expect that. And that way, if it doesn't get worse, then we're in a better position to deal with it. So I'd say, you asked for 5. Let's see where we are. We've got health and the pandemic. We've got emotional health and emotional well-being, and diseases and crises of despair. We've got our own healthcare providers and others to look toward and work on as a county, as a functioning county government, and make sure that we take care of our own people. And we have housing. And then I would say, once again, circling back to that robust economy, so that people have things to do, so that people have things that they can do to, as we come out of this, begin to catch up on generating that multi-generational wealth and prosperity that is the American dream, so that their children can have a better life than they had, and their grandchildren can have a better life, so that people can have that third component of that vision that I shared with you earlier, that people tell me that they have, that Chaffee County, a great emotionally and rewarding, safe place to live, with clean air, clean water, open space, land, rural character, wildlife, and then a sustainable economy where people can prosper, get the nicer things for life. And I'm not talking about, a mansion on a hill for everybody. That's not what everybody wants, and it's certainly not what a lot of people around here are into. They'd rather be out rock climbing and mountain biking than spending a lot of time maintaining a big house or spending all their money on a big house. They'd rather be spending it on climbing gear and fishing gear and kayaks and stuff. I know that's, you know, kind of that's our value system here, but they should be able to afford a decent, safe, adequate place to live that's warm and dry at night without working 3 and 4 jobs just to make ends meet. We need to have those economic opportunities. So I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, then 719-963-4164, kbaker@chaffeecounty.org. Thanks.
10 minutes.
Okay, we got 10 more minutes.
We have a couple of questions. You want to take one more?
We can take 2
Good.
more. We'll
2
see
more?
what time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Allison Brown said that you stated there was a process for citizens to raise issues such as ethics, conflicts of interest with the Common Ground Board. What is that process?
You can email me your concerns, Allison, and your considerations, and you know, if you, especially the more specific you can be, the better, as always. And I guess you know, if you want it to be confidential, of course, we can do that, and then we'll figure out some way to protect your confidentiality. This Zoom call notwithstanding, but I will take those and work with it, run with it, and report back to you. I will get in touch. I'll keep you posted. And that goes for anybody out there. I mean, I said this we had a kind of a tense meeting, about 18 months ago about a topic. And I said, one of my jobs, as I see it, is to try to restore people's faith and confidence in government. I'm not trying to restore people's faith and confidence in Congress at that level of government. I just want people to know they can trust and have confidence in their local government, in their county government. This is where it really, you know, it's like I said in an interview or somewhere a few days ago, I've had people, and I'm not doing this to toot my own horn, but I've had people say, well, you should run for state house, or you should run for the Senate, you should run for something higher. I don't want to go any higher. I don't think I can go any higher. I think this is the pinnacle of what elective service and government service is all about. And it doesn't apply to every county. There are counties that are too big. I think this is about as big a county as I'd want to be a commissioner in. I don't think I'd want to be a commissioner in, say, Weld County or Douglas County or El Paso County. That doesn't seem to have a lot of appeal to me. But helping people with real problems and being in a position to actually bring things to bear on real problems, that's really what attracts me to this work. And it's not sitting in a cubicle all day. It's not sitting behind a big desk all day. I like getting my own coffee. I like returning my own phone calls. I like working with real people. And this keeps you engaged and it keeps you aware. You have to be, one of the great things I like about this is you're always around young people. It's one reason I love the outdoor business. It was why it was a great second career after being in the military. I was always around young people with young outlooks and young ideas and fresh ideas and ways of looking at things that, you know, as much as I hate to admit it, I'm getting older. In my heart and in my soul, I still think I'm 20-ish, but you know, the calendar doesn't say so. And I know when younger people look at me, they don't see a peer. But this is where things really, really matter. And this is where I feel like it's the best place for me right now and the place that I can make the biggest difference for the people that I know. And now we're down to 5 minutes, so probably took too much time talking about that.
It was way too much time. Not really, not at all.
I'm not trying to eat up time. I'm not trying to run out the clock.
We can go longer if we have to.
Yeah, we can go longer if we have to.
There is a couple of comments. I'm going to save the comments till the end here. Let me get back to this question, Keith. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
There are many alternative forms of housing that have been adopted throughout the country, from tiny homes to creative government housing. Can you speak about the county's decision that have affected some of these alternative forms of housing?
Oh, yeah, well, we've made some that I know people thought were unwise, that probably didn't allow some housing that could have addressed that. Sometimes because of laws and codes and other sorts of things, you do have restraints and constraints placed on you that you wish you didn't have. But now here's something that, this is something I really want to see. And this is something that, talking about second term priorities and second term goals and objectives and projects, is after the comprehensive plan, and every planning model has its limitations. Every model about anything has its limitations. You'll see some planning models that are linear. They're like, okay, you do plan A, then you do plan B, then plan C, then plan D, and you do it this way. And then after 5 years, you start over again. And then there are cyclical models, and then there are several others, and they all have their shortcomings. And one of the shortcomings with a linear model is they never fit together like that. It's like sausage being made. Things kind of get messy. But something that we do anticipate doing is, after the comprehensive plan update is completed, and some of this is why models don't work, is that we get grant funding from the Department of Local Affairs, or DOLA. Some of that's dependent on their grant cycles and stuff. We'll embark on updating the land use code. And we also want to have more detailed planning arrangements with the municipalities about densities in the county immediately adjacent to the municipalities, so that the municipalities can extend services into these areas, like water, like sewer, like broadband, like others, lowering construction costs. And if we have higher densities, then that lowers the infrastructure costs, like streets, sidewalks, gyms, recreational facilities, and other sorts of things. So code and policy can help foster those sorts of things. There's a term that I heard in a webinar several years ago, and it's starting to become increasingly mainstream, called missing middle housing. And those are things like courtyard bungalows. If anybody ever lived in Southern California, they were ubiquitous. I lived in one in Coronado, California, as a young naval officer. I know that a lot of people, if you watch any LA noir movies, like LA Confidential, or any of those sorts of movies, Mulholland Falls, any of those sorts of things, there's always somebody who lives in a courtyard bungalow. I mean, it's given. And they're small and they're great. But because they were all built in the teens and 20s, they're hitting block obsolescence out there. I'd like to see some of those. I think those are great housing opportunities for people. So allowing up to triplexes and quadplexes, multifamily housing, courtyard bungalows, manse apartments. There's some of those down in Colorado Springs around Colorado College. They look like a big old house building, but inside there are lots of different apartments in there of different sizes. Those are nice, and they provide housing opportunities, and they provide a housing opportunity that can be characteristic with a form-based code in parts of town that, you know, you don't want kind of a quadplex, or you don't want a courtyard bungalow. You want something that fits in, and that would fit in with that part of town. And it allows to build community. Somebody in one of our town trustee meetings up here one night said, years ago, said, you know, one of the things I really like about Buena Vista is the way people are mixed together. She said, what other town could I live in that I do what I do for a living, and then right across the street, one house over, is one of the most prominent physicians in the county? Nowhere. That wouldn't happen. And that's one of the things that people say they love about our municipalities and our county, is there is that blending that we have amongst our citizens. And that's building community. That's that genuine care and interaction with people and listening to them and understanding their needs that helps make Chaffee County what it is, and will help keep us that way if we foster it and if we keep it. Yes, sir.
You mentioned laws and codes that affected affordable housing. You were willing to make rapid changes to land use codes that affected multiple citizens regarding dog ownership. Why were you not also willing to make changes to the LUCC that would have allowed tiny home parks to be designated separately from RV parks?
That's a good question, and I'm willing to entertain that. It needs to come up via the Planning Commission and be presented, and that was a shortcoming that whole situation, and we know what we're talking about here, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, that it identified that our code could better address that and needs to better address that. So I'm always willing to entertain those sorts of things. It's kind of like the analogy I used earlier about the wolf closest to the sled and priorities. There are other sorts of things going on, and that one didn't rise to the top, but I certainly think it could be addressed in a meaningful way that would benefit housing stock and the code. I mean, a lot of what we need to do to fix the housing problem is policy and process. It is to make the kind of things we need easier to do, like duplexes, like multifamily, like courtyard bungalows, like a lot of those things. Let's make those easy. Let's eliminate some of the administrative barriers and some of the process friction that keeps those things from happening. So that's a good question. It's a valid question. It's one I understand completely. It's a question I ask. And it's, you know, it's, if I were king for a day, a lot of this stuff would be fixed, but I'm not. And we also have standardized credit card scanners everywhere. So you didn't have to figure out which one it is. They'd all be the same everywhere. Yes, sir.
We are out of questions. I do have a couple of comments that I wanted to share with you. One was from Doug Welch, who says, "Thank you, Keith."
You're welcome.
The other is from Lori Boydston. She says, "Thank you, Keith. I hope that when I'm elected to House District 60 that I can emulate your leadership."
Oh, great. Thank you, Lori. I look forward to working with you. Well, a few wrap-ups. You know, there's this whole thing about, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm a huge student of culture. This kind of, you know, being in touch with young folks and knowing what's going on. I don't read as many business and leadership books as I used to. I used to consume those things like crazy. Then they started kind of getting similar. But I've always been a huge student of culture. And I believe in following your passion, whatever, you know, you need some cultural touchstone. If it's movies, if it's music, which is generally what it is for me, and any literature or anything about music, that's one of the ways I try to stay in touch with younger people and know what's going on. But my COVID activity, instead of building a sailboat in my basement that I can't get out, or building an ultralight aircraft, or remodeling the garage or something, is I've been really listening to even more podcasts than I listened to before. And I'm a huge consumer of podcasts. Now, I do listen to a lot of business and leadership podcasts. Listen to a lot of Malcolm Gladwell. If you don't listen to him, he's a great one. But there's a lot of talk about purpose-driven leadership and purpose-driven management. It's almost like the quality management of this era, if you remember quality management, and the Deming method, and Jack Welch's Six Sigma processes at General Electric, and those others. But it's identifying what your purpose is. And this kind of relates back to what I said earlier about I'm not real big on saying these are my priorities, because if I do something that I said was priority 5, somebody who thinks priority number 1 is the top priority is going to take issue with it. And it's not, it's not set up that way. It doesn't work that way. My purpose, what keeps me motivated every day, even when the chips are down, even when the problems seem insurmountable, even when it's something that I say, gosh, I wish we didn't have to deal with this. Why did I get myself into this? My purpose is to be an unrelenting advocate for the residents of Chaffee County, period. And if I do that, and I do it well, then all the other stuff takes care of itself. All the other stuff is details. If my primary motive is the well-being of the residents, not just citizens, but residents of Chaffee County, and that's my animating force every day, then I know there are people going to disagree with me. I've had to make decisions I wasn't real keen on because the way the law was written, or because of this, that, or the other sort of thing, or putting myself in the other person's shoes. And that's the difference between being ready for this work and not being ready for this work. Because early on, when you're inexperienced, there's 3 vectors of pressure that are going to come no matter what. Because these are partisan elections, unfortunately. You've already heard my take on that. Members of your party will try to pressure you. There are people who are your supporters and are somewhat your ideological mentors, if you will, that will pressure you. And then thirdly, even at the county level, there are lobbyists who will pressure you. And unless you have your own values, unless you have your own principal touchstones that you can stand with, and unless you've stood up to that in the past, then it's challenging. I'm not saying you can't do it. I did it, and I know others that have, and most of the people that I know have. I'm just saying that pressure comes. And sometimes it's tough, and you can get your edges rubbed off. But somebody told me once upon a time, you're born with your integrity. You develop your values over time. And if you ever compromise your integrity, then little by little by little, it gets easier and easier to compromise. And eventually, it's gone. Some people would say compromise it once, or modify it a little bit once, and it's gone. Someone else once told me, every time you deviate from a standard, or every time you deviate, you reset, you create a new standard. And that's why I think we should, to the extent we possibly can, treat everyone equally under the eyes of the law and adhere to those principles that are in the Declaration of Independence, and that we say every time we pledge allegiance to the flag. Liberty and justice for all, that all people are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's my purpose. Those are my values. You've heard me discuss some of them. Some of them have been interwoven here and they haven't been called out specifically. But I think many of you know me and know me well enough by now that it's a humbling thing to ask someone for their vote, because their vote is a very precious thing. But it's an ask that I take very seriously, and I ask you for your vote. Ballots go out in about a month, and so I ask you for your vote and your support now. And now the shameless plug time before I forget. We've got buttons. Have this distinctive window sticker. It's great for the back window of your SUV or something if you have, or your crossover. These are high quality stickers. We're not messing around here. We got high quality vinyl stickers that peel off easily on November 4th, 5th, whatever it is. And then we got this one, which I like, because this is a kind of a throwback to the Minardi Formula One team. It's the bright acid yellow pops and the blue lettering. Hashtag, got to stay in touch with those younger people. Hashtag keep Keith. And this one's also great for your back window or your bumper. And then we do have contribution envelopes if you need one, or you can go to bakerforchaffee.com and find a contribution page on there and make a contribution via secure credit card transaction. We do have lots and lots of yard signs. If we run out, we can get more. Same with the stickers. Don't worry about asking, just please use them. Don't take them and with all good intentions to put them up and then not use them. Website, bakerforchaffee.com, Chaffee County Commissioner Keith Baker on Facebook, and then from there you can find my Twitter, my Instagram, and everything else. I've got multiple avenues of trying to reach out to you, and those are also multiple avenues that you can reach me. So I certainly appreciate your attention tonight. I appreciate your patience, because I know I have a tendency to be long-winded about some of this stuff, but it's because I'm passionate about it. And don't be a stranger. I love listening to you. I love hearing your ideas, and much peace. Thank you.